Not getting away this time. I had a good jig bite and he got away from me. And this time I got him. Oh man, that's a nice bass right there. Stay hooked, buddy, stay hooked. There, oh come on. Slippery little guy. There we go. Start the morning off with a good old jig bite. You gotta love that. There we go. Like I say, I missed one a minute ago. I didn't give him time to take it. Throwing a little bigger jig right now. I'm throwing a football jig, 3/4 ounce. Getting it down there and just dragging it along the bottom. It's Dalton, everybody. I'm gonna come out here and have some fun today, do a little bit of fishing and see if I can get some more. I got him. I missed him the first time he came back and got it. There we go. Oh, this is a good one right here. Stay tight on, buddy. Stay tight on. Stay on. Good fish right here. Really good one. Oh yeah, look how fat that dude is. Using heavier line today. I got 15-pound test fluorocarbon. Heavier jig. Look at that. Look at that dude right there, man. That's a nice, healthy spotted bass right there. Third bite over here, or actually fourth bite over here on this jig. Got a pretty flappy tail on it. I'll go over this jig with you and the setup and everything here in just a little bit, but I'm gonna keep fishing it. I'm dragging it along really slow. I'm not doing anything special, just a very slow, methodical dragging. I came in the front gate. The guy that was working up there told me that people were telling him it slowed down out here a little bit because of the cold fronts, and it is chilly this morning. And so I'm right off the bat, okay, well, if it slowed down, then I'm going to slow down and drag a jig around, see if I can get a handful of good, healthy spotted bass out here. Got it. Got me another one. Another jig bass. Yeah, there you go. Another, man, that's a nice quality spotted bass out here. Tell you that much. That is a quality fish. There we go. There we go. There's a nice fish right there. Good fish on a jig right there, guys. What I'm doing right now is giving that beautiful bass a big old kiss. What I'm doing right now, I call it fishing uphill. Behind me, I have a really steep, rocky bank. It's coming out about a 45 degree. I basically will spot lock up at the top of a bank like this, and I'll throw a jig out and I will literally just drag it uphill. That's what I call it, dragging a jig uphill. And it works pretty good. Well, I'm gonna have to retie this jig. I've caught a few on it today, so we're gonna be talking about how to set up a jig today, or at least some of you requested that I do a video on setting up a jig. So later on today, I'm gonna go on up, find me a little campsite with a table, sit down and just kind of show you how I set up a jig. It's the way I like to do it. Now, just real quick, I do want to go over my setup here of what I'm using with this jig today. This is a 3/4 ounce net bait pocket bug jig. Color is peanut butter and jelly. I've got a green pumpkin twin tail, a Zoom twin tail trailer. That's all I'm using. This is a Daiwa Tatula 100 reel, 15-pound test, Seagar and Vizix. This is my custom rod. It's made by Sunday's Custom Rods. You can find them on Instagram. A young man named Ryan made this for me. And it's a 7'1", medium heavy. And this was my setup today. So again, I'll talk about how I trim these jigs up here in a little bit, but just want to give you guys a setup I've been using. I'm catching these fish today out around 25 to 35 feet. In case you guys have ever wondered, this is kind of funny. Well, I did not expect this, but okay. Come here, you. Get in the boat. Well, I guess white bass like jigs too. All right, so I found me a nice little park bench here facing the lake. I didn't want to sit at that one over there. There's a bunch of bees over there buzzing around. I'll probably get stung. Okay, let's talk about setting up a jig. Now, today was a great jig bite. I probably have more bites today on a jig than I have in a while. Probably about 12 to 15 bites, which is excellent on a jig. It was all a 3/4 ounce football jig. That's what I threw most of the time. I had 6 rods with me. Tried for crappie for a few minutes. Threw another little grub. Didn't get any bites. Went right back to the jig. Caught them out there really deep. I was in 20 to 40 feet of water. And it just seemed like some of the more healthier ones were out there. So what I'm going to do first of all, if you don't do a lot of jig fishing, or some people have never fished with a jig, that's okay. It's one of the most versatile and easiest baits there is to fish. Just a few things you got to figure out, things like line size, weight, that kind of stuff. But today we're going to talk about how I like to trim a jig. There's 2 particular jigs. If you don't know a lot about jigs, or maybe you do and you're just looking for a different perspective, there's 2 of them I'll recommend to you. One of them is called a Buckeye ball head jig, and you can get these on Tackle Warehouse. This one here happens to have a hula grub on it, but it's a ball head jig. And I buy also ball head jigs called Boss jigs, where I tie on I put on my own skirts in the various colors that I may like. The second one that I'm going to recommend to you as far as a football jig, and this is a brand new one right here, so let me open it up. But this is called a net bait pocket bug. It definitely is my favorite football jig. My favorite color for a jig, when I can get away with it, is peanut butter and jelly. So this is a peanut butter and jelly net bait pocket bug. You could see that flat top kind of helps that jig stand up, kind of even helps your trailer to stand up. So basically there's 3 things I'm going to do when I set up a jig. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the skirt. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the weed guard if it needs it. And then the third thing I'm going to do is add my trailer and trim it if necessary, and most of the time I do trim it. So I'm going to wear my glasses so I can see what I'm doing. Net bait pocket bug, this one here is a 1/2 ounce peanut butter and jelly color. If you notice, it comes with a long skirt. Some of them are even longer. They call it a mop jig. I don't really fish a lot with mop jigs. What I want to do is I want to trim this skirt to where the skirt material literally sticks up in the water. So if you have a lot of skirt material, it will tend to lay there more. If you trim it up, it'll flare out better. I want that to flare out when it's sitting on the bottom, because it looks like something in a defensive position. So I'll show you how to do it. It's pretty easy. So you got the bottom of the hook here, and I like to trim my skirt right around the bottom of the hook. So I'm probably going to take a good solid inch off this. I just turn it upside down. That's all I do. I just turn it upside down. I grab the material, pretty simple thing to do, and I just cut it. I just start trimming it. I don't care if it's even, does not have to be even, that's no big deal. And I'm gonna take a look at it. Is that the way I want it? No, there's still more sticking out here. So now I'm just gonna cut like this. And I'm gonna trim this thing all the way up to where it's almost at the bottom of that hook. You can see the hooks there. I may have 1/4 of an inch past that hook. That's all I want. Now, the weed guard. If you're fishing in vegetation where you need a heavier weed guard, you may not want to trim this. But when you're out here, say at this lake, when you're really not dealing a lot with that, you're just dealing with some wood, you know, some rocks, it helps a little bit. So I don't want this weed guard to be super duper stiff. Here's what I do. I'm going to take some of these little strands and I'm going to bend them out from the weed guard like this. And I'm just going to bend them. I keep hooking myself and do that all the time. At any rate, I've got them bent out. I'm going to take my scissors right at the bottom and I'm going to snip those strands away. Now what I have is still a pretty good weed guard, but it's not too stiff. It's not going to get in the way of my hook sets. Sometimes I'll take and flare it out like this, and you can see how it's kind of flared out. It just makes it easier for a hook set, yet it still is going to be able to get that fish hook. Now, if the weed guard, some of them come way out here, I just take my scissors and cut it down to where it's right over that hook barb, and that's pretty much where I want it. And that's exactly how I set up my jig. I want a short skirt because that jig's going to flare out a whole lot better. Test it in the water and you'll see that skirt start to lift up. I do like rubber jigs. The problem with rubber is they just don't make many colors, so I tend to stay with the silicone jigs. Now, the last part of it, the trailer. Now this trailer here that I used today is called a Fat Albert Twin Tail. This is made by Zoom. It's green pumpkin purple, and that's what I use today. I also like the Strike King Rage Bugs, the Strike King Rage Menace. There's so many skirts out there. So here's what I do. I'm going to measure this because I just want the legs sticking out. So I sort of see where I need to cut this. So here's what I'm going to cut it about right here. Boom. Even that out a little bit. And there you go. Now I'm just going to take and run this through. Real simple like. Make sure it's run through the middle. Push it up. And there you go. I've got my jig all set up with a jig trailer. I kind of put it on a little bit crooked. That's okay. You can go ahead and stretch it out and fix it. And there you go. Real simple. Now, one thing I like about these double tail, do you recognize this? It kind of mimics the tails of a hula grub. And when you throw this thing, it's going to have just a ton of action. That's how I set up all my jigs. I rarely change my approach to setting up a jig. I just trim it right below the hook so it'll flare out real good. Trim the weed guard if necessary, and then put the trailer of choice. And that's how easy it is to set up a simple jig. If you haven't fished a jig, it's something that I do recommend you learn about. It's one of the easiest things to fish. Now, I know there's all types of videos on how to fish jigs, and I've watched many of them, and I've tried different techniques. But guys, I just go back to the way I learned. I drag it. I like a heavy jig when I can get away with it, because I know I'm going to maintain bottom contact. And I like that bottom contact because I can get over the top of things, whether it be rocks or branches. If it gets a little bit hung up, I just shake it a little bit and then snap it out. A lot of times I get a bite that way. I just cannot get away from the simple dragging of a jig. It's the way I catch most all of my jig fish. You may want to invest in something like this, a jig box, where you got you all kinds of skirt materials. They come pre-banded if you want them. Buy you some different jig heads. As far as sizes, let me give you some sizes for jigs. 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce. Those are the 5 sizes that I keep with me. I don't have any of them heavier than that, and I don't believe I have any of them lighter. It's going to be those 5 weight sizes. My line size is going to be depending on the weight. Today, I used a 3/4 ounce. I used 15-pound test fluorocarbon. Why would I do that? I don't want to fight that jig. If I try to throw that on 10 or 12-pound test, a 3/4 ounce, the line's going to have a lot more stretch, and I'm going to be fighting that jig. I don't want to fight the jig. I want the jig to work for me. So Hopefully this helps. If you don't know a lot about jig fishing, it is a fun way to fish. You can catch a lot of fish. I thank you all for tuning in. As always, I appreciate all of you. Plan on getting out here either toward the end of this week or next week. If you're a tournament fisherman, my recommendation, if you want to get a little bit bigger keeper bass out here, fish a jig. It's going to work for you. Some of you guys already know that. I'll talk to you guys next time.